Yeah, good evening or afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, what time zone you are on this round globe. Yes, it's round. But it's time, wherever you are, for Free Thought Hour. Ooh, it caught me taking a swig. Anyway, please welcome Tercia, my co-host, the lovely Tercia. How the devil are you?
Well, it's nice to be called lovely by, by somebody somewhere in the world. Thank you for that, John. I'm good. I'm all right. I'm still coughing and still having some issues with allergies that are mysteriously caused by something that I don't know. But
Well,
I'm better than I was last week. Um, so yeah, if I break down, it's just some mysterious allergic reaction to something that nobody has been able to figure out. But I'm here. I'm here. It's good to be here. Nice to see you. Nice to welcome anybody. I see one eye. I see we have one eye watching us. Whoever it is, welcome. Have fun with us.
well, yes, I'm sorry you've been poorly, and I wish people knew what it was so that you could take some, action to prevent it, or whatever it is you're allergic to. Stay away from that.
If only I knew what it was. I decided at one stage this afternoon, I thought maybe it's weekends. Maybe I'm allergic to weekends because the Fridays and Saturdays I start coughing and swelling up, and so maybe I'm allergic to weekends. Maybe that's it. Maybe I was just
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Well,
The human body is a mysterious machine. We haven't got it figured out nearly as well as we would like to think.
you're not
Uh,
kidding.
how are you doing, John?
Yeah, I'm physically okay, thank you. My life situation doesn't get very much better, I'm afraid. But it is great material for the book that I'm writing about it, and I do get favorable responses from people I've shown this book to who've taken the trouble to read it.
Uh, I, I have not taken the trouble to read all of it. I started, but yeah. So, John, is David joining us tonight?
Yes, but he may be a few minutes late because he's out shopping with his wife and daughter. And where did he say he was going? He told me this. Ah, he may not be home until around his 4 p.m. New York time, so he may not be along for another 25 minutes.
Which means you and I will have to keep things going. But we've done that before.
Oh yes, yes, we don't find it difficult. Hopefully, keep your fingers crossed. So, so anyway, we are expecting him, and he's been sent the link. And it's good to have him back as well because, as you know, he also has been off sick for many weeks. But we had a very enjoyable Views on the News, he and I, last week. I don't know whether you've watched it, but it's really good. I recommend
Uh,
it.
he's had COVID as well, didn't he?
Yes, yes, and he had it rather severely, and it set off his circulatory problem. So he's lining up for yet another open heart surgery operation.
Oh no, that's so well. At least it can be done, but that's not
Yeah,
good news at all. John, that's something we haven't spoken about. As far as I know, we
yeah.
haven't spoken about COVID conspiracies and vaccines since I've been co-host.
No, we haven't really, have we? We haven't done a lot of medical stuff, really, have we?
No, we haven't. But COVID these days, it seems is not so much a medical issue. COVID and vaccines these days can be seen as more a topic of conspiracy theories and the like.
Mm,
I I've been spending this past few days because we had school holidays, so I had a little bit more free time,
yeah.
and I spent some of it catching up on uh, all sorts and varieties of podcasts. And I watched one by um, He calls himself Professor Dave Explains. I don't know if you're familiar with his YouTube channel. He's quite a big channel. He does science stuff. You might, maybe we should reach out and have him as a guest. But he did a debunking of Brett and Eric Weinstein.
Yeah, there is a Weinstein. Yeah.
Yeah, two brothers, and they came. I think the elder Brett came into prominence in 2018 because of some racial issues at the college that he was teaching at, and led to his resignation and whatnot. But Professor Dave does a debunking of these two brothers. They're both biologists, as I understand.
I like them already.
Well, don't speak too soon. And of course, liking somebody doesn't mean, what does it mean to like somebody? But he spoke about one of the brothers who's also sort of a anti-vaxxer, and he made several remarks about the origin of COVID, and it is a topic that interests me, this whole thing. What do you think, John? Where did COVID come from?
Animals. It's a zoonosis type disease. Yeah. And in fact, there's been a recent article about this saying that it's very strongly likely to be derived from bats.
But was it a lab leak, though?
No, not a lab leak at all. No, that is extremely unlikely.
There's, well, I don't know. I haven't dug into the topic enough, but I do know that there's another. That's somebody we must get as a guest, John. He is. He's actually. I used to follow him when the pandemic broke out in 2020. I was a keen follower of this. He's from your country. I'm not sure where. He's a nurse, specialist nurse, and he did these regular updates. Maybe, Jesus, it would be nice if we could approach him to be a guest on our show, because he was one of the first people. What is his name? How can I forget this? Well,
while you're remembering his name, there's a recent article, 9th of September, about where COVID-19 came from, and it's in the BMJ, and it says, it's written by Munkeet Lul. I don't know anything about him. But it says the pandemic's origins, the lab leak theory, and the blame game have been in the headlines again. Despite another war of words, we aren't any closer to a definitive answer as to where the novel coronavirus came from. Munkeet Louis asks why. So then it goes into this history between Anthony Fauci, who responded on behalf of the vaccine people to a US congressional hearing. And he said it's simply preposterous to allege that the funding research created the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So he doesn't think that it comes from a lab. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene, a far-right Republican representative from Georgia, who has absolutely no qualification to speak on this subject area, said we should be writing a criminal referral because you should be prosecuted for crimes against humanity. You belong in prison. So David's just returned from his
Shopping trip.
shopping exploit. Yes.
Dr. John Campbell. John, that's the channel. Dr.
Uh-huh.
John Campbell at Campbell Teaching.
I'm looking him up.
Dr. John Campbell.
I got
We
him.
must get him on as a guest. That would be amazing. I'd love that. I followed him almost religiously during the pandemic because he gave such interesting information. I haven't been, yeah. What fascinates me more than the actual information, I think, is how we process information. I think that fascinates me more than information, because it seems to me that as far as many subjects are concerned, the more we know, the only thing we can say with certainty is that the more we know that we don't know what we need to know.
Well, that's a very good point, because the only thing we can be certain about in scientific terms is when we're wrong. Is that right, David?
Oh, hello. Hi,
Hello.
Kirsia. How are you,
David,
dear?
it's so nice to see you.
It is wonderful to see you as well. Well,
It's
you know,
it's
with
been such a long time.
it's been very long, yeah. But I had this self-imposed exile, and I'm slowly coming back into the fold, and hope to continue to join you guys from now into the very far future, if all goes
Hang
well.
on, David, are your fingers blue?
Oh, yes.
Are you all right?
This one, I did the Christ thing here.
Oh,
That's where the nail
because
went
that
in.
means the nail has to go.
Right, exactly. So aside from doing shopping, which is why I was late, I've also been painting. And believe it or not, while this may show otherwise, I actually did get some on the wall.
Okay.
well,
But
that's a relief, because I was thinking you had really bad circulation.
Yeah. If I was this bad, I probably wouldn't be on the show right now.
No, blue fingertips, bad sign.
Yes.
yeah, well,
But no, now you know the color of our porch. Our back, yeah.
this is like in home improvement type painting. It's not artistic, creative painting, as in. Am I right?
No, it's quite frankly, it's nesting behavior. You're right. It's not artistic in any way at all. It's like, well, you're going for open heart surgery in November. Don't you think you should paint the porch?
While you still can.
While I still can, because what happens, So so I'm getting all these things out of the way.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really sorry that you have to go for surgery, but I'm really happy that you can go for surgery, that there is the option.
That's right.
And,
It's just, I mean, the alternative being that, I'm not around, to be with family and friends.
That is absolutely it. So we're lucky that open heart surgery was developed in the 1960s.
Yeah.
And I'm a lucky recipient of it, as are you.
Mm-hmm.
And we discovered last weekend when we were doing Views on the News, that we are both the victims of circumcision as well. So we've got a lot in common in bodily terms.
And it may be connected to our heart troubles. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's an open question at the moment. Yeah. Yes. I'm sure it was traumatic, and I don't remember.
Right.
I can get why, David, you were circumcised, but John, why were you circumcised?
Well, it's stupid, isn't it? It's because, it wasn't a ritual circumcision with me, but it's because it got to be the normal thing to do to baby boys. I've got a theory. No, it's not even a hypothesis. It's a suspicion that back in the day, when people like me, non-Jews, were being circumcised routinely, it was done because at the time, surgeons wanted a job that they could do, which was pretty much risk-free. And, it gave them a reason to be. And so they did that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you had a choice, if you were a would-be surgeon and you had a choice between doing something which had a lot of patient deaths,
Mm-hmm.
or something which you could pretty much assume your survival rate would be 99 point something,
Right.
then which specialism would you go into?
Well, they get to pad the bill for the NHS for every tip that they take.
Yes.
But how did this work then? Was it done? Did the mother take the baby in 7 days after birth, or a week, or a month, or was it done directly after birth?
I don't know. They didn't ask me.
Right.
Wow.
So I couldn't put it in my diary.
I would really like, maybe that's something that one could research historically, because I mean, I'd love to know whether it was sort of done routinely or whether parents had to request it.
It was definitely done very routinely. It was almost considered, not for religious purposes, but if you were doing this secularly, there was, this false data. I caught the tail end of this about how somehow it's cleaner. Forget about the aesthetics, but that it's healthier for the child, where none of that is actually valid or true.
No.
It just became the thing to do. In fact, I think a lot of times doctors wouldn't even ask the parents. They would just snip.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we'll do the umbilical cord, then we'll do this nasty bit on the end of the penis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Organized religion to take away sensation,
Yeah. It's ridiculous. But it happened. Who should we sue, do you think? Who should we sue?
I feel really, I feel sort of, I don't know.
Don't tell me you've got circumcision envy.
No, I just, I'll be 52 in January, and I was married for 25 years. On Thursday was my 25th wedding anniversary.
Wow, happy anniversary!
Yes.
Thank you. That is a special achievement.
Yes,
for
silver.
my husband to have stuck it out with me for 25 years.
Well, what's the old joke? I've been married for 11 years, and two of the happily married for 2.
Well, I don't know. I'll have to get him in here. He can be your guest next Saturday, John. You can have that might be interesting. He'll probably make a very good guest. But just to get back onto the topic of circumcision, I don't know whether it's I don't think I know. I don't know whether my husband is circumcised. I've never asked him. And I don't think I would know the difference, because I was a very religious.
Hang on. This is getting a bit too.
What I'm trying to say is, I feel silly because I don't know.
Look, it's okay. It's okay for me to reveal my personal secrets and for David to reveal his, but it's not okay for you to reveal your husband's.
Yes, but it's actually mine. It's mine because I grew up in a very, very conservative Christian sort of environment, and because I was taught that good girls don't have sex just all over the place, and also because I don't find human body parts particularly attractive, especially the ones that we normally cover with clothing. I try to avoid seeing them as far as humanly possible. But I don't think, if I were a Nazi officer and I had to distinguish whether a man was a Jew or not based on his genitals, I don't know that I would have been able to do that. Which is a bit silly, I suppose.
Well, it's a good job you're not a Nazi officer then. That's all right.
Exactly.
Oh, everybody would have lived. I would have said, no, you can go on. You don't have to die. You don't have to die.
David, in memory of our enjoyable chat last week,
Yes.
I've got this. Listen.
Ah, a lager.
Yep. Look how skillfully I can pour.
Bravo.
That's only when I haven't had too many. I can't pour up. So, David, I wondered if you'd like to give your talk. You know, you presented your talk on ID when you came over to our event, our downsized event in May.
Yes.
I've got it here. I wondered if you'd like to talk us through it now.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
I'm putting you on the spot, but it doesn't matter. You're in Friends here, so
Sure.
if you can remember saying anything to say about these slides, that would be great.
Sure. I could give it a shot.
Busket.
Yeah. Let's roll with it. See how much I actually remember from May.
You might find that we interrupt you.
Very good.
I was going to say, may I interrupt with questions?
Yes.
Can I put up my hand? How do I put up my hand like this? Sort of...
We are all friends. Just barge right in. Don't worry about it.
Okay, here we go. There you go. You'd have to say next slide, please.
Okay. So the purpose of the talk in May was to focus on the views and the wrongfulness of this thing that was created some time ago, but in its modern consequence exists today. And in its modern form, it's called intelligent design. In the past, it was called creationism, but intelligent design is this sort of putting new clothes on the same concept that there must be a designer in order to make all of us and the world that we know exists. And so at the Potemkin village really is this idea, and started, I think, in the 19th century, where this landowner put up these fake houses or facades. And as the Russian oligarchs were passing by on the river, thought, oh, look how great this all is. This landowner is very prosperous, except the reality is that there's nothing behind it. And that is the case with intelligent design and creationism. For all of the arguments and however much they try to make their views scientific, the reality is that scientifically and legally, there is nothing behind it. Intelligent design and creationism is a Potemkin village and has found to be both by law and by science, because it's not producible, it's not, it can't be proven using science when you bring faith in. All right, you can go to the next slide.
I had a conversation with somebody on Facebook today about that very thing, about creation, in this case, being unscientific. And I explained that historic claims cannot be substantiated in scientific terms. And the reason that this doesn't apply to evolution is because it isn't just a historic claim.
Mm-hmm.
We can see it happening today, but we can't see creation happening today.
Right.
So that one is untestable. But today we can see multiple independent corroborating examples of evolution happening. And what we've done in the case of fossils is we've simply said we've applied the principle of uniformity, and we've said, so it must have been the reason behind these different fossils too.
Yes, and we have to remember that it's not just the physical evidence of fossils, right? You have biology. We have the concepts of genetic flow and gene drift, which tells you how populations change, how species adapt, become extinct, or speciate and become other species. There's all of this fossil and genetic evidence, which is monumental in the scientific community. That if you look for it, you can find it. It's not hiding. But if you if you choose to believe someone like this guy we have on the screen right now, you'll be confused and you'll remain ignorant. In fact, I have been asked to. I don't have. Sadly, I don't have the thing that the response that I read once I got the request to debate this guy. But I get asked probably once or twice a year to debate creationists. Oftentimes it's creationists reaching out, but sometimes there are times when secular groups will say, oh, we really want to have a debate. And I have never done them, nor do I ever plan to do them, because I don't want to give oxygen to bad ideas. And if you just look at what creationists say, it is not just misinformation. It is disinformation. It is really bad ideas. So I never take the debate. And as I think Richard Dawkins said this once too, that when he's asked to debate someone about intelligent design or creationism, he never opens that window, because he says he doesn't want to give any validity. And why pad somebody else's resume debating Richard Dawkins? In fact, when Bill Nye debated Ken Ham, I don't know if you remember that, several years ago. I thought it was just such a bad idea, because Answers in Genesis made money off of this. They sold videos, they sold DVDs, and it didn't solve anything, because even if you have all of the information, if someone is so connected to the idea that the Earth is 6,000 years old and humans and dinosaurs live together, there is no amount of information, of facts, that will move somebody's opinion. Used to be that facts meant more, but now in some circles, your opinion, your feelings, especially with creationism and intelligent design, is somehow equal to science, when in fact it isn't.
Well, I confess that I'm guilty of debating Kent Hovind.
Okay.
But my justification is that I didn't give him a leg up, because I'm not the balance of power isn't. It's not Richard Dawkins and Kent Hovind benefiting from the oxygen of his publicity.
Right.
It's me, because I'm less famous than Kent Hovind. So if I can get on his stage, I may get an audience that I otherwise wouldn't.
No, I get that. Believe me, my only fear is that there will be someone who is maybe a good scientist, but not a good debater. And what happens is then Hovind, just double speaks and just is so aggressive that it makes the person who has the knowledge seem inept or to have the wrong ideas.
He did that. He's a. Sorry, Tercia, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that we should debate creationists, but not on the science. I want to debate creationists about the scriptures.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't see any merit at all in debating even for a scientist, even for a biologist, or an anthropologist, or any person in the sciences to
Whoa.
debate.
I knew this would happen. I knew this would happen when I drank too much.
Oh dear, have
Spilled
you
your drink.
spilled? Have you spilled? And the reason I'm saying this is creationism doesn't base their premise on science. They base their premise on the Bible.
Right.
And therefore, any debate with a creationist has to be focused on the Bible.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think should be done more often. I think.
Well, they never want to substantiate their position. They only want to try and rubbish ours because they know they've got no validation.
Well, it's also.
I don't even want them to substantiate their position. I just want to have an audience where I'm convinced that there will be people who will, by a reasonable person just asking the right questions, will begin to question the doctrine of evolution, of creationism, not of evolution, because it is intrinsically so deeply flawed that, and to me, that is what the conversation should be. Because, and that's something that I find more and more often that bugs me in conversations between atheists and Christians, and atheism and Christianity, is there's not enough focus on the original text, because Christianity is based on the text. And I think we need to make way more of the text and look at and point out in conversations the internal inconsistencies within the text itself.
Well, and I'm sorry to interrupt, because you make excellent points here, and we could spend the next hour really talking about how full of flatulence Bible stories and everything else are. I heard this whole issue of intelligent design, and I can't take credit for it, but I'll share it here. The difference really is between intelligent design and science is that intelligent design is a conclusion in search of facts, and science is facts in search of a conclusion.
Yeah.
Meaning that you start out from the premise of God created everything, and then you try to find the things that fit into that idea, and then you make it work. That's not science.
No, it's anti-science.
Yes.
I want to respond to that with another thought that I had while you were talking, David. I follow Forrest Valkai. I don't know if you're familiar with him. I'm quite a fan.
Okay.
He's well worth. It's another person, John, that we must try to get on our show. He's such a nice guy.
Yeah.
Forrest Valkai. You can look it up. Forrest. I think it's WEREST VALKI. And he's a biologist, and he does a lot of debunking of creationism with Gutsy Gibbon. And I was watching a show by him where he had a conversation with an ID proponent. And the one thing that struck me in that conversation, that struck me as a non-biologist, as a non-scientist, because I'm just a regular, fairly ignorant outspoken atheist. That's basically my only claim to fame. But what struck me in that conversation is I think sometimes science communicators and science as a discipline, in engaging with myths and with religion and with religious beliefs, I think the fact that science is way less tidy than it is presented, actually it is to the detriment of science and of science communicators. And why I'm saying this, so this, in this presentation that Forrest did, he explained about genes and genetics and species. And just that, the thing about species, most people have absolutely no idea what the word means. And and that it's really not nearly as clean cut as it's even presented in a science textbook.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the ID proponents and the creationisms, what?
Yeah.
I'm drinking water. I'm not even drinking wine. Listen to me. The creationisms. I think that if we were better able and more willing to communicate to the masses out there who know very little about many things, and I include myself as one part of the masses, that science is very messy, and certain
Mm-hmm.
sciences are more messy than others.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we emphasize that, I think the better we will be at combating the bad ideas of creationism.
Yeah.
And I think science is presented as too tidy, whereas real
Well,
scientists.
can I have something to say about that? Because I think
I'd love to hear your opinion.
because science is mostly presented by journalists, and they want to sensationalize, they want to sell copy, they want to make things look simple, and that's why it's misrepresented. It's not, if you watch actual scientists speaking, I mean, take for example the recent presentations by medical people when the COVID epidemic was on. They were couching their statements in very definitive ways. They were saying, we don't know yet, this is the evidence suggests that this might be the case, but until we've gathered some more data, we really can't say.
Mm-hmm.
That's how proper scientists speak, but journalists don't want to speak like that because it doesn't sell copy, because people want to read certainty and sensationalism. They want to read, we have the answer.
Right.
You're right, but there's something that I do think needs to be addressed, and I'm saying this as a teacher who works with textbooks on a daily basis. As I'm sitting here in my office, I'm surrounded by textbooks that I'm using to compile lessons and whatnot, and it's not wrong, and I understand it has. I don't see that it can be done in another way, although I think it should. Most people have their exposure with what we call science up to the age of about 15, in sort of the general what is it, K6, what do you call it in the States?
K to 12.
Kindergarten to
12.
K9. So most people, including myself, you have a sort of a general education where you have science as one of your subjects, and then you have the physical sciences and the biological sciences, and we don't even think of history and geography and language as science, as those are maths and science are for the smart kids, and the rest of us just do literature and art and things like that. And even in those textbooks, the information is presented as if it's very much so we're going, this is how this works and this is how this works, and then only a very few people that specialize in a field where they really work with where they work hands-on with the science get to appreciate the true intricacies and complexities. Mm-hmm. And I think that opens a door for the journalists and the creationists.
There's a reason behind that. It's because, as a former biology teacher, I don't want to confuse children with complexity. I want to build from simple concepts and then say next year, I wasn't telling you the whole truth. Yeah. Here's a bit more detail. That's why. So if you pick up a textbook, it's wrong. But it's wrong for a reason. It's wrong because we've got to present it in little bits that they can swallow. And
that's the dilemma that science faces, because it is way more complex than we can present it. But maybe we should just not try, just say, listen, these are the facts, blah, 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 blah. If you don't want to study it, you'll probably never understand it. And it's a conundrum, but I think it's a real problem. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed, and I think it can be addressed by teaching more philosophy of science.
Mm-hmm.
And so that for every little bit of science that is taught, critical thinking and philosophy of science is taught, and that science should be taught as a methodology, not so much as a set of knowledge.
Well, again,
I think you can do. I think you can do both because, and Tercia, again, I agree with you. We lose students. There's an attrition that comes and when they enter higher grades for a lot of reasons. They're going through puberty. There's all this peer pressure. The internet, and even before the internet, it was TV that took people away from having creative ideas of their own. But you're right, because the facts are important. We can't have a knowledgeable citizenry if they don't have facts. However, how you get there, critical thinking, philosophy, like I have always tried to teach the elegance of science in when I'm teaching, and not to say that it is perfect, but the opposite of perfection. That science is an imperfection, an imperfect process, which humans have invented to rationally understand the world. Now, do we get things wrong? Yes. But the elegance of it is that once we realize we have a better idea of what this thing is, whether it be heliocentricity or, evolution or whatever, that the body of science says, oh, yeah, let's get rid of that and let's go to this because now we know. It wasn't that the scientists before were lying, but to John's point, it was that we have better information. Now, of course, what someone who is anti-science would say is that, well, then you can't trust scientists or the mechanics of science.
well,
Except, these people are saying this, want to pull us back to the Dark Ages, when there weren't antibiotics or the internet or anything like that. Because what's the conclusion? What is it that, at what point do you come back to feel connected to your savior? You've already adopted telephones, wireless technology. That's all science. You've had surgeries, you're taking medicine. That's all science. But people will be very selective of what science they distrust and what science they feel the urgency to misrepresent.
Yeah.
Often it isn't the case of the science that's beneficial to the person. It's the science that scares them because it fundamentally shatters their beliefs.
Tercia,
Like
you're a teacher. You're a teacher. You're a teacher, Tercia. I'm going to say I'm going to give you a project to teach a group of young children, and you can choose either the philosophy of science or dinosaurs.
Oh, I would go with is the history of science different from philosophy of science? Because maybe I should then rephrase. I would teach dinosaurs by telling them the history of how dinosaurs were discovered and how that became a science. That's what I would do. If I had to teach, I would not begin by telling the kids, all right, so these fossils have been discovered and da 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 da. I would begin by telling a story, by saying people found these weird bones that they could not identify, and then they asked questions, and then they found this, and then they found that, and then they came to this
Mhm.
conclusion. And because of what they have discovered over 300-400 years, this is what we now, with what we currently know, am able to say about what we call dinosaurs.
Mhm.
That's what I would do.
I-
Because, and I'm biased here. I'm 100% biased as somebody who's a non-scientist.
mhm.
My love my love of and fascination with science began in my 30s, when I began to watch series like Cosmos,
Mhm.
when I watched the brilliant BBC 3-part series The Story of Science. I was never interested in science. Physics and chemistry scared the shit out of me. Never
So,
mind.
so there you go. You see, you're making my point. So you found it as a pupil very difficult to engage with science, and I'm saying that this is a problem. You know, you can easily tempt kids to get interested in dinosaurs, but getting them interested into some sort of higher cerebral concept is a bit difficult.
That is, but that's what I think. There should be more focus on the stories of science and scientists, and for most people, everybody loves listening to a story. Everybody can understand a story, but the hard sciences in particular, they are daunting, and they entail many things that many of us find really impossible to comprehend. Whereas if you tell the story of science, something like what Bill Bryson did in The Short History of Nearly Everything, that is more accessible to more people. That's not going to create more scientists. Well, maybe it will, but
Mhm.
when it comes to to combating the influence of creationism and flat earthism and fundamentalist Christianity in the world, I think it's important that we realize that science communicators and educators need to change the strategy, so that we reach more people at a more basic level. Uh, that's just. I mean, there's no right or wrong. It's just, I think we need to combat bad information that is being put out there by the internet, by the Kent Hovens and the Ken Hams, and because they're doing active harm.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well,
You'll
I,
tell
I,
me
I
about that.
yeah. I mean, I would say, and I'm someone who does go into, although I teach college, I do go into public schools and libraries. And when I teach about dinosaurs, what I find often is the case is that the kids know more than me about dinosaurs.
Mm.
That they'll come in and they'll talk about different species of dinosaurs
Mm,
that they're aware of that I have no clue of where they're from.
yeah. Mm,
And so what fascinates me about this, and I think Carl Sagan talked about this as well. You mentioned him in the context of Cosmos, is that, you know, students, young children have these buckets upon buckets of curiosity
mm,
that they want to be satisfied with when they're very, really young, because everything in the world is new.
yeah.
Um, and I really think the purpose of modern public education is to feed that curiosity. Then, now, whether you do it with the philosophy of science or with facts or a combination of both, fine, because you see the degradation by the time they're 12, 13, 14, 15. They're not asking questions anymore.
That's right.
They're,
Mm.
um, they're focused on other things,
I've got
and
one who doesn't want to come out of her room.
oh, yeah, exactly. So I think that we are almost predetermined, or there's like a predestination for human curiosity. Now, can it be subverted by organized religion and the stuff that is being sold by the Ken Hams and Ken Hovens of the world? Absolutely, because you can fill, as Saint Peter said, right? Get the kid while they're 8 years old, and I'll make them a Christian by the time they're 20, because you just fill them with all this stuff. You replace the buckets of curiosity with sand and rocks, which become these immovable objects, rather than, oh, so this is how science works. Now, that's not everybody, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but I think it's important to remember that, and I think we're all acknowledging that if science is under attack, it's up to each of us, whether we're scientists or not, to be voices for modernity.
The trouble with the story aspect of it, and I appreciate that you can frame things as a story to make them more interesting. And when I started, say, A-level biology, I used to go through the history of biology, how it had developed, and then the microscope, and then we had other gadgets that enabled us to look even smaller, and so on and so forth. But what worries me about story is narrative can take over entirely. Mm-hmm. It can be offered as an alternative to evidence, and it's a tricky tightrope to walk, because this is what these guys are doing. They're offering us creation, which is only a story,
right?
As though it's on a par with evidence.
Right. It's a conclusion looking for facts rather than facts looking for conclusion. Should we move on? Because I am a little tight for time, and there's that.
Yeah, go on. Sorry, it was my fault. I accept full responsibility for derailing us almost completely.
No, this is, first of all, this is not a derailment. This is an ascension of what we need to do here and talk about this. So I'm appreciative of the fact that you're asking questions. And that you've got ideas, let them out.
Next slide.
Sure. So, as I like to say, when we talked about the elegance of science, and I sort of dropped this so we don't have to spend a lot of time on this slide, a bicycle with square wheels might still be considered a bicycle, but it's not going to get you very far. And what science does is it creates, over trial and error, a better design, a better way of thinking, so that we can move further and faster. 150 years ago, humans were not flying. Now we've got spacecraft that are in the outer reaches of the solar system.
Yeah.
And we can thank science for that. But if we decide to put square wheels on a plane, or try to lift them with balloons, or hope, or prayers, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, next. So I have to take my glasses off to read this. You see, I'm getting old.
We all are, sadly.
So these are just some of the points, 6 points that if you're going to accept the natural world and understand natural selection, is that there are some suppositions based on the facts that we have about the age of the universe, the age of the planet, to understand that species over billions of years, both everything from mushrooms to bugs to fish to everything, have either speciated, adapted, or gone extinct. That when we look specifically at our own evolution, that with the Morocco find of just a few years ago, it pushed back archaic humans to about 300,000 years. And that the evidence is that although Homo erectus left Africa 1.2 million years ago, 1.8 million years ago, and filled several niches in Europe and Asia and the Middle East, that our own species left Africa 90,000 years ago and then populated the rest of the world. And that is why we have the variation in biological diversity that we have today. And finally, we have to understand that there's no period at the end of the sentence. That as biological beings, we are still evolving.
Yes.
Our bodies are still changing. And that we're not finished. We are not the top of this paradigm where, okay, it's over, because evolution doesn't work like that.
No. Not only is there no full stop or period at the end of the sentence, but there wasn't a period at the end of the sentence before.
Right, exactly.
So people ask silly things like, who were the first humans? Well, there were no first humans. Right. It's like saying, what were the first poodles like? Well, we didn't have Fifi and Fido and made them. They didn't exist before. They've gradually been bred from wolves. Mm-hmm. And there's no position where you can say this is where the wolfiness stops and the poodliness starts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what most people who are creationists have most trouble with, because that is what, when you're confronted with a science textbook as a child, it is almost presented in that manner. Mm-hmm. And that is what creationists find. I think that's what most people who want to accept intelligent design, they find that aspect of natural selection most uncomfortable, because we want those neat lines. We want to say,
this is, we love boxing things. Yeah.
And that's the one thing that science communicators miss. We don't get the message across that science doesn't work like that. And that's maybe what I'm trying to say with my whole thing about stories. We need to tell the story of science, which is a messy story, even as it's happening today.
If I may, a shameless plug, A Tale of Many Trees, which is the story of human evolution that I wrote and was published in April of 2024. You can find it in many American schools and libraries, and it's available on Amazon. And it takes us in just a few pages through the history and timeline of all of the messiness of evolution.
It should be in every.
You see, you are a storyteller.
I am.
It should be in
the stories of science.
Yes.
It should be in every hotel bedroom.
Absolutely.
Okay, next slide.
Oop, there.
Okay, so conversely, you have the pretzel logic of ID and creationism, which we've talked about, and the fallacy of the things that must be part of the philosophy, attitude, and misreasoning in order for you to accept creationism, is that the Bible is not just a work of philosophy and ritual. It is a science textbook, which it is not. That the earth is only 6,000 to 10,000 years old. That there is evidence for divine purpose and cause, although it only exists in science in the Bible. Therefore, that's not a science textbook. Therefore, it can't be true. For some, it is the idea that Darwin himself, and even in Darwin's time, that he was seen as an agent of evil, that natural selection is a lie, that anyone who teaches it or believes it is in league with evil forces, that stories in the Bible show why dinosaurs exist at the same time as humans. All of these things that are just impossible to prove just with philosophy, just with theology, that you have to accept. Okay, next. So I put this up here because I want to share that this is that this push to teach creationism has existed for as long as there has been these the science of evolution, going back to right after Darwin published his treatise on the origin of species. You had all of these different quote unquote experts who were coming out and saying, "Oh no, we're divinely inspired." Up until today, where you have Darwin's Black Box by Michael Behe, who is a noted he's a biologist. I wouldn't say he's noted.
Biochemist, I think.
Yeah. Who's writing on the idea that there's irreducible complexity and things couldn't exist unless there was some designer. So really, I don't call historical and even modern ID, even though it's known as intelligent design, I see it as intergenerational duplicity. That it's just wrong,
Just a
and that it
rebranding.
carries over from generation to generation, only to serve those who want to push the misinformation.
That's right, because they want to rely on stories rather than evidence.
Okay, next. Right. Okay. Then, of course, we've got this guy who had this whole idea about bananas.
Yes.
And how perfect they fit in your hand. Therefore, they must be designed by a designer because look how great they are, and we can eat them. It just, the insanity of this is, if it was a comedy sketch, it would be really, really funny.
Yes.
But because these are real people who really believe this, it's really, really scary.
Yes.
Okay.
He never explained why the coconut is so hard to eat.
Or why, goddamn it, I can't find a parking spot when I'm late.
Yes. Yes.
So I talked in the May presentation. I talked in some detail about how the repetition of science helps get us closer to facts, if not the truth, right? So even though we call it Darwin's theory of evolution, really it's a law that you could assume that based on the evidence, the observable evidence, and the science that goes into testing the idea of natural selection, would operate on this planet no matter what this planet looked like. And just like the law of gravity, just like germ theory and so on, the laws of evolution on other planets would operate the same way. And we know that because we have DNA, we have fossils, we know that we see archaic organisms and viruses and fungi have evolved on our planet, and we can study those things. We can anticipate how these processes may or may not work. We know with just getting your flu shot, right? That is an anticipation of the adaptation of the flu virus that may affect you or a large part of human populations. So we have all the science that knows how evolution works and how adaptation works and how species may change over time. And oftentimes In medical science, it's very beneficial.
Yeah.
In the physical sciences, it's required, and in the anthropological sciences, it is the standard bearer for how we explain the physical world, not just about humans, although that's really important, but about all life on Earth.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, we can. I give some data here about the number of what scientists um, accept as true versus, in some cases, um, different populations within necessarily the U.S. So you have 98% of American Association Advancement of Scientists accept evolution because they understand science, right? A number of U.S. adults, it's a very different modality. Okay, next slide. I think I have a few more. This is another slide from scientists. Here's the thing: the more knowledge you have about science, the less likely you are to be a person of faith or
Yep.
to express a religious ideology. It doesn't mean that you can't be someone of faith and do science, but often is the case, those two come together. That the more you understand the nature of nature, the less prone you are to need or want metaphysical explanations for life on Earth.
Yep. There's no need for a supernatural explanation.
Exactly.
Every mystery we've solved has had a natural explanation.
Exactly. Okay, so the idea of evolution did not start with Darwin, and you have, as I like to point out, just as organized religion, and before that, many forms of religion and spirituality has existed. You have the idea of evolution existing way before Darwin.
Yep.
And here are some um, uh, different philosophers and scientists within their own time, including Islamic scientists, Asian scientists, of course, the Western tradition as well, all coming to some brief conclusions about the idea that species change over time, that
Yep.
we came from water, that the adaptation is real, speciation is real, extinction is real, without having it crystallized in Darwin and Wallace's. Let's not
Yep.
forget Alfred Russel Wallace here,
Yep.
co-discoverer of natural selection,
Mhm.
um, uh, have written about. Okay, you can move on, and then you get into the folks. I always like to say that it takes a village. And usually I'm the village idiot, but these are all 18th century scientists who were fundamental in developing, and many of them were religious, right? So you had people of faith also doing science, even doing what we call evolutionary science, right? But in their own way, helped moved us forward, whether it be Lamarck, Linnaeus, the great chain of being, Buffon, the idea of coining terms like biology and paleontology, even Erasmus Darwin, who died a few years before Charles was born. Charles was born in 1809. So you had all of this thought. So the idea of evolution is not new. What's new is that at least since 1859, we have been able to divorce it completely from needing any mythology in order to make it true. And of course, this is, Darwin faced a tremendous amount of problems in his own time, mysticism and the occult during Victorian England was through the roof. The church and the Vatican were both contemptuous, as I write, but really wanted to cut Darwin off at the knees. Let me see. Excuse me, I'm sorry. My next shameless plug, Darwin's Apostles, which was a book that I and Abby Hafer wrote, which is a history of evolutionary thought and Darwin's times, is available on Amazon as well. Also very well received. But I won't go into that.
Well, we want them to be in schools.
Yeah. Yes. Darwin himself, was a hypochondriac. I think at one point he was religious and gave up faith. He lost Annie, his probably most beloved daughter, and that really pushed him furthest away from faith. In fact, there's a great film, a British with Paul Bettany plays Darwin. I think it's called Creation is the film. If you or your audience hasn't seen it, I highly recommend it. Even though it's a Hollywood movie, it really does show Darwin's angst. Darwin didn't, came up with natural selection and didn't publish for 20 years because he was so regimented in making sure that he was correct.
Yeah.
That he stopped himself from publishing, even though everyone around him, um, uh, uh, his friends and fellow scientists like Joseph Hooker, T.H. Huxley in the States, Asa Gray, also Alfred Russel Wallace, all these people and many, many more knew what Darwin was working on. And many of them wanted him to publish way before he actually did. But he didn't speak for himself.
No.
Even after Origin of Species was published, he did not defend Origin of Species publicly.
The climate at the time was that doubt was a sin.
Yes.
And so he didn't want to have a trace of doubt. And of course, it's not possible to eliminate doubt.
Right, exactly. And again, Darwin was the son of a physician. He was a person, although he was not part of the aristocracy, he was a person of means. And his wife was a believer. And he didn't want to upset his family life. And he didn't want to upset the social caste that he was in.
Yeah.
At the same time, this is how conflicted he was. He knew he had lightning in a bottle, essentially, with the Origin of Species and natural selection. Okay, I guess
he should have published under a pseudonym.
Right. Well, a lot of people did review his work under pseudonyms. In fact, many of the people here, including Darwin's bulldog, and again, that's why I call it Darwin's Apostle, because these are the men: Alfred Russel Wallace, John Draper, who was British American, Joseph Dalton Hooker, who was the curator of the Royal Kew Gardens. And he was Darwin's best friend. Asa Gray, who in the United States got the publishing rights, although copyright law did not exist in the United States. People were publishing Origin of Species in the U.S. Essentially without permission. And Asa Gray, who was a religious man, by the way, but was able to respect and understand science, helped get the American rights to Origin of Species published in the U.S. So these were, in 1858, there was, of course, the publication, I believe, at the Royal Society of Darwin's work and Russell's paper, which began the quote unquote debate over science and sort of its Cotillion or coming out party was then. Next slide. Actually, can you go back a little bit? Just one. At the same time, we also know that both T.H. Huxley and Joseph Hooker and even Draper at the Huxley-Wilberforce debate, which was supposed to be this probably the first recognized science versus creationism.
The showdown.
The first showdown.
Yeah.
And of course, Huxley was brilliant. Hooker was brilliant. And Draper was such an advocate and admirer of Darwin. Okay, I guess you can move on. So a half century later, we have John Dewey basically lauding the origin of species as giving us a chance to free ourselves from politics and religion, and at the same time as unleashing our creativity, discarding the idea of permanency, because we know that species change over time, and that it was Darwin and Wallace, of course, who are responsible for that. Next slide. This is W.E.B. Du Bois, who also saw in natural selection the social liberation of human achievement, meaning that if all humans come from the same ancestors, then the idea of whiteness being of value and blackness being or any other pigment being inferior is itself a lie, because we are one human family. Yep. So this came out in 1909, and he wrote about how important Darwin was to ultimately a catalyst to what would later become the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Next slide. So, of course, there are people who hold on to their religious belief who are important scientists. And it was Stephen Jay Gould who said that there's non-overlapping magisteria, that you can actually hold both the science and the religion and be able to do both equally. I personally have some trouble with that, but I never want to cast aspersions. I, of course, call this, and I'm a big fan of Planet of the Apes, as many of you know. In 1968, you had Dr. Zayas, who was the chief defender of the faith, but also the chief minister of science. And we know what happened there. He takes the doll because he finds evidence that humans existed before ape culture, and then throws it down and blows up the cave because it basically invalidates their scriptures.
Mm. Yeah.
So I call it the Dr. Zayas syndrome, that all of these very smart people on the left of your screen, and they were very smart, and they are, in some cases, they're still alive, very smart people, but they all sort of have this, what I call the Dr. Zayas syndrome.
Yeah, they've got compartments in their brain.
Yes, exactly.
Just weird.
Yeah. So again, we have to be very careful, because we know that this fight for modernity continues on a daily basis. We know that in many U.S. states, there are attempts, some real and some successful, to teach the quote unquote controversy where there is no controversy, where the idea of teaching intelligent design as equal to a natural selection has gone on as well. And of course, in the courts, it's always been knocked down and invalidated, including the Kitzmiller versus the Board of Ed in Pennsylvania. I can't remember.
The district of can't remember either.
Yeah, but in that if you ever look at and I've read the opinion of the judge, he basically takes both Behe, who I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
who was an expert witness for the
Dover,
creation. Um, uh,
Dover Area School District.
Dover, right, exactly, to task, saying, no, you can't teach theology in public schools as science. And then there are countries that ban or teach as speculative
Yeah.
the idea that natural selection is fundamentally working or should be part of biology.
Mm.
And again, the reason why is for complete religious reasons.
Yeah.
So the war between religion and science is not based on, oh, I just have this healthy skepticism that unless I could see it, it's not real. It's no, it's my religion is affronted and I'm a religious person
Yeah.
and I will not accept religion. I will not accept science if it disavows or challenges my faith.
That's right. My religion is tops.
Right. And so here are some other countries and places where this has happened. Next slide, please. In Alabama, just recently, and I have this in here, you can see that this guy, the judge ruled that frozen embryos are children, even though they are not biologically children. They're not, they're embryos. They're and now you have right now these debates in the U.S. about IDF, about what womanhood is, and this is all from the religious values. And this judge quotes the Bible as saying that these embryos, which are not children, right? Not the legal definition, not the biological definition. He's taking his legal, what should be his secular legal opinion, and it's coming from his faith.
Yeah.
Next slide. And so, I guess sort of to wrap up, I would say that the world is a better place because of Darwin and Wallace's work, because it has affected not just the discipline that I love in anthropology, but also physics, astronomy, geology, medicine, social science, philosophy, even theology is affected by natural selection.
Yeah.
And so we could see by the publication of 1859 and the scattering of how this knowledge has been not only reproduced, but then used by other sciences, right? The idea, and in the slide I showed before, this overlapping of science, right? When you say something is accurate in science, and then another desperate science can, through its methodology, can say the same thing, then you have verification. So it's not just even people within biology saying this, it's people in physics and chemistry are saying that the biologists are right.
Yeah.
So you have these multiple layers of knowledge and creativity and curiosity and scientific method. And that's the exciting thing. That's the wonder. That's the curiosity that we need to keep instilling. Next slide. And yes, it is, as you were mentioning earlier, it is and this is an old slide, but it's a very messy family tree. And this doesn't even include many of the species of hominids that have just been found in the last 6 years. So yeah, it is a messy family tree, but that's okay. That only validates natural selection.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Because an intelligent designer wouldn't have made such a mess.
No, of course not. And in the end, if you're going to follow intelligent design, then it's basically Flintstone science. If you
Yeah,
remember the Flintstones,
yeah, not the Flintstones.
right? So that was like 1960 or so. This cartoon comes out, and you see
Yeah,
these proto-humans running around with dinosaurs. I
yeah,
mean, that essentially is intelligent design. And if you want to accept that fiction, I can't make you not accept this idea, but it is not going to solve the world's problems or even your problems. If you want to believe that, as in and at the Creation Museum, that velociraptors and T-Rexes live side by side with humans, I'm not going to be able to dissuade you with any facts of science. I hope that you'll come to that conclusion. And my job is to help you get there. But it is beyond the pale of ridiculous
yep,
to think that any of this is accurate, truthful, and not unbiased. And of course, there's the Ark Park. And the funny thing is, you know, um, Noah was able to build this ark with his son, but Ken Ham took millions of dollars and several years to build a likely reproduction based on
yeah.
the Bible. Next slide.
So these creationism and ID is really the yabba dabba do religions.
It's the yabba dabba doos. And so I like to close on a positive. And it gets to a lot of the conversation that we're having about teaching, about advocacy, about acknowledging and being skeptical, about our roles, whether we're scientists or not, to protect science, and to be active socially, politically, through organizations or just your own own politics, because science is under attack, and it will be. It is an intergenerational thing, and that's why it needs the counterbalance of people who are advocating and who are teaching and who understand the very nature and philosophy of science. Next slide. I don't know if there's a next slide.
There's no more. That's the last one.
Oh, okay. So I will say thank you for letting me pontificate. I hope I didn't bore you too much. No one shot themselves, so that's a good thing. There's no blood on the carpet.
To us. It's been brilliant. Thank you very much. In fact, it's been so brilliant. I've allowed the show to run on by another 27 minutes and 52 seconds.
Wow.
When it's my normal practice. So thank you for that, David.
Things evolved.
Yeah.
The show evolved.
Yes, it did. Yes, the show evolved. Yes. But so next week we've got another interesting guest in the form of Sylvia King Paris. Now, as is usually the case, I can't remember a thing about her, but when I fished for her, she was an interesting catch. So I will make a poster and tell you more about her as the days go by.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Sylvia King Harris or Paris?
Paris. I found her on social media and decided to invite her, and she's accepted. So here she's coming. Yeah.
Bravo.
So thank you very much, Tercia and David. I hope you will be able to join me tomorrow for Views on the News, because we've got some really interesting news in Global Atheist News this week. Some of it is about Trump's claim that Haitians in Springfield have been eating cats and dogs. So you'll want to watch that news, and you'll want to comment on it in the Views on the News show.
Are you going to play that song by the South African artist who
I could, couldn't I? It's really good, isn't it? They're eating the cat.
I've been trying to get hold of him to have him on our show. He actually lives in Cape Town.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. Trouble is, these people are very busy.
Yeah. And we low key.
Mm. Okay. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you.
David,
It's
stay
wonderful
safe.
to see you, Tercia. John, as always.
Yeah. Don't go blue.
All right.
And thank you. Thank you,
Only with
audience.
my vote.
Oh, she's gone again. Yeah. I've actually got a series of videos that I made on this subject, which is a whole playlist which I could link to the details below this show.
Fantastic.
I think I sent you one of them, David, and I think you said you might use it for your lectures. But I've got a whole series of them now, including one on speciation, which we were talking about.
Oh, wonderful.
So I will link them into the details underneath. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.